Let's talk about variables. Let's create a new project, a new Java application. You can name it whatever you want. Call this one variables test. And again, we'll be writing in here between these two brackets in the main method of our class. What exactly is a variable? Well, in math class, if you have a variable such as x and you want to give it a number, a value such as 42, you can easily do that, and when you use x later on, you'll assume that x equals 42. So let's say you want to use the quadratic formula, and then 42 equals negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You can just replace that with x. Perhaps not the best example. But in Java, we have something fairly similar. This is also the concept of a variable. The format for a variable is as follows: the data type, variable name, the assignment operator equals, the value you give it, and a semicolon. In practice, this is something that is quite easy. So let's say our data type is int, for integer. Int x, our variable name, equals 42. And the semicolon lets us know that this Java statement is complete. If we run this, we won't get anything. And that's because we never actually used x later on. If we want to print x out, just like the last video, print x. System.out.println will let us print that value out. And there are other data types as well. So the basic data types, also known as the primitive data types, with a few exceptions, are int and double. And other data types include the string, the character, and the Boolean. Let's just focus on these four for now: int, double, string, Boolean. We've already gotten over an int, which is an integer. So that's just whole numbers. We're trying to make x 42.0 or maybe 42.6. That won't compile. That means it'll give us an error saying that these are incompatible types, meaning incompatible data types, because int x means that x is an integer and 42.6 is not an integer. So that will run. If you want to make x a double, that will give it a decimal value, and we can use that decimal later on. So double lets us do decimal values. Print x out, x equals 42.0, print out 42.6, x equals 42.6. It's fairly self-explanatory. You can do some pretty cool things with this. So let's say you have int x equals 42 again, and you want to say the answer to life, the universe, and everything is, print this out on the same line. So what did we just do here? Well, this thing between quotes is actually a string. We can replace that string with a variable. So instead of writing this, I can just put in string, which is this variable that I used earlier. So when I'm doing string here and x here, I'm referring to this string and this x. If I change the value of x, it'll change the value of x over here, which is the value of x over here. So if I give x the value 108, that will print that out. And x, you can see, is changed here, and the string, you can see, is changed here. The other data type I was going to cover here is the Boolean. So let's say Boolean x equals true. There's really not much variety here that we can do. So what is a Boolean? Boolean is true or false, 1 or 0. And if you want to print out x, again, system.out.println, we'll print out x, and that just gives us true. If we want to print out, let's say x equals false, that's fairly similar. So this doesn't seem very useful right now, but when you're just comparing whether something is true or not, then it can become quite useful. And of course, you could also use an int to represent 1 or 0. So let's say int x equals 1, or let's say int correct equals 1, and int incorrect equals 0. We can print out both of these, referencing them later. So int correct and int incorrect. So again, this correct is referring to this correct, which is referring to 1. This incorrect is referring to incorrect, which is referring to 0. And that will print out 1 and then 0. Not very complex. Eventually, you'll get into some more complex stuff with variables because you're going to be doing stuff like iteration and object-oriented programming, and variables will become extremely important. And that's where things like shorts and longs and characters and all that sort of thing will come into play. But for now, the most important data types are int, double, string, and Boolean. Now if I try to give Boolean a value other than true or false, let's say Boolean bool equals 42, I'll get an error again saying incompatible types because Boolean can only be true or false. Let's say that 42 is true right now. Doesn't output anything because we didn't print it out. But you can see that all of these variables are assigned much like they would be in math class.